It all started with smoke thick. Black smoke pouring into the sky as I stood helpless on the street, watching everything I'd worked for go up in flames. My mansion, the one I spent years building and customizing down to the smallest detail, was burning right in front of me. And the worst part? It wasn't some random accident. It was the final straw in a long, bitter war with the HOA. A group that was supposed to protect the neighborhood had become my biggest enemy. They claimed my new pool design violated some outdated regulation. Then it was the paint color, the landscaping. They fined me, harassed me, and tried to control every little thing. But I never imagined they'd push it this far. Neighbors whispered about sabotage. The fire report mentioned something suspicious, but the HOA denied everything, like they always did, smug faces behind closed doors, acting like they ran the world. And maybe they did, for a while. They had power, connections, and the ability to make life miserable. But they underestimated the one thing I had that they didn't: patience. And a plan. Losing my home should have broken me. Instead, it lit a fire of my own. Not a real one, but a quiet, calculated one. I started attending every meeting, buying up votes, getting close to people they ignored. Slowly, things shifted. And when the opportunity came to buy the land under the HOA office itself, I didn't hesitate. One by one, I took back control not just of my house, but of the entire board. They didn't see it coming. The same people who fined me for trimming the wrong hedge were suddenly being served with eviction notices. And that's when the real chaos began. But how exactly did I pull it off? And what happened when they realized I was the new boss? You're not going to believe what came next. Before everything went up in flames, my battles with the HOA were already heating up. At first, I thought it was just strict rules, but over time, it felt personal. Every week, I'd get letters, warnings, fines, threats about violations that barely made sense. My driveway lights were too bright. My garage door design didn't fit the neighborhood theme. Even my front porch furniture was labeled a disruption. At first, I played along, thinking it would pass. But the more I followed the rules, the more they found reasons to come after me. The president of the HOA, Mr. Cranston, was especially ruthless. He had this quiet way of smiling while telling you everything you couldn't do. He'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built and treated it like his personal kingdom. People rarely challenged him. Those who did often ended up with endless citations or dragged into community meetings designed to humiliate them. I started noticing patterns. He had a tight circle people who voted with him, protected him, backed every move. It was more than an HOA. It was a power game. And I had unknowingly stepped right into it. What made it worse was that other residents were scared to speak out. A few neighbors confided in my sharing stories of being bullied, fined into submission, or even threatened with lawsuits. But no one had proof. And everyone was afraid to lose their homes or be targeted next. When my mansion burned, some looked shocked, others avoided eye contact. One woman slipped a note into my mailbox. It said, "You weren't the first." That's when I knew this wasn't just about me. It was something bigger. I had to dig deeper, get smarter, and fight back. But I couldn't do it head-on, not with people like Cranston watching my every move. So I did something unexpected, something they never prepared for. I started by keeping my head down, acting like I'd accepted defeat. Let them think they'd won. Meanwhile, I was quietly making moves behind the scenes. I hired a private investigator, someone with no ties to the neighborhood, and asked him to look into the HOA board members, especially Cranston. What he uncovered only confirmed my suspicions. There were shady financial dealings, backroom deals with contractors, and whispers of board members getting kickbacks for approving certain permits while denying others. It wasn't just about rules, it was about control, money, and ego. At the same time, I began connecting with a few neighbors who had stories of their own. One woman, Maria, had been fined repeatedly for parking in her own driveway. Another guy, James, had been told to tear down his perfectly legal deck, no explanation. Just orders. They were fed up, but afraid. I told them I wasn't going to fight back with anger. I was going to use their own system against them. That's when we started pooling resources, buying up small properties tied to the HOA's voting power. Little by little, we were shifting the balance, but Cranston sensed something. I noticed him watching me more closely, showing up near my temporary rental house without any real reason. One day, I found my tires slashed. No cameras, no witnesses, but the message was clear. Back off. That only pushed me harder. Inside those HOA meetings, I listened more than I spoke. I started learning the bylaws, the loopholes, the gray areas they had taken advantage of for years. I wasn't just trying to take them down. I was learning how to beat them at their own game. But the deeper I got, the more dangerous it felt. The lines between neighbor and enemy blurred fast. And just when I thought I had things under control, something happened that shook everything. It all started to come to a head the night of the emergency HOA board meeting. I'd managed to get enough votes behind me to propose a change in leadership, but Cranston caught wind of it just days before. Suddenly, the meeting location was changed last minute. The time moved up, and notices conveniently never reached certain homeowners, lamely the ones he trusted. But I was ready for that. I had documented every move, every suspicious decision, every unfair tactic. And I had more than votes, now I had stories. Real testimonies from neighbors, screenshots of messages, photos of things they thought no one saw. As I walked into that meeting, there was this strange silence. Cranston sat at the head of the table, his usual smug grin replaced with something tighter, nervous, maybe even afraid. But he wouldn't go down without a fight. Right away, he challenged my presence, accused me of stirring up division, even suggested I was breaking community trust. But the room wasn't backing him like before. People were watching, listening, and this time, they weren't scared. That's when the power flickered. Just as I started to speak, the lights blinked and went out. Total darkness for a few seconds, then backup lights kicked on. People looked around, uneasy. I kept going. I laid out everything: names, numbers, incidents. The tension in the room was thick. Every word I said felt like it carried weight. But then someone interrupted. One of the board members stood up, quiet, usually in Cranston's pocket. He looked right at me and said, "You don't know what you've started." Suddenly, a folder slid across the table toward me. Inside were photos, not of the fire, but of me. Me meeting with neighbors. Me at my rental. Someone had been following me. And in that moment, I realized Cranston wasn't just fighting to keep power. He was ready to destroy anyone who threatened it. My hands froze on the folder. The photos inside weren't just casual snaps. They were taken from angles that meant whoever was watching had been close. Too close. Some of them were recent. One was from just 2 days ago, showing me handing off documents to Maria. Another showed James unloading lumber in his backyard. It wasn't just about me anymore. They were watching everyone who had sided with me. I looked up, and Cranston's face told me everything. He wasn't denying it. He wanted me to know. But then, something even more unexpected happened. A quiet voice from the back of the room cut through the tension. It was Mrs. Langford, the soft-spoken elderly woman who had lived on the street since it was first built. No one ever suspected her of being involved in anything. But she stood up, holding an envelope. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. She'd been keeping real records, years' worth of HOA financials, hidden fees, off-the-books contractor payments. And the one thing that shocked us all, a transfer of emergency funds approved the same week my mansion burned down. People gasped. Cranston's eyes narrowed. For the first time, he looked cornered. But just as Mrs. Langford stepped forward to hand me the envelope, two board members, one still loyal to Cranston, stood in her path. The mood shifted fast. The tension went from silent shock to unease. It felt like anything could happen next. And that's when the alarms went off. Not fire alarm security. Someone had triggered a silent panic alert. Red lights flashed around the building, and the doors automatically locked. Phones started buzzing. A neighbor whispered, "Check the HOA app." I did. A message had just been sent out from Cranston's account to all homeowners. Emergency, security protocol in place, unauthorized takeover attempt detected. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just fighting a board. We were trapped in their system. For a moment, no one moved. The red security lights painted the room in a pulsing glow, and the buzz of locked doors echoed in everyone's ears. Cranston sat there, calm now, like he knew he still had the upper hand. I looked around. Some neighbors were panicked, others just confused. But I wasn't frozen. I pulled out my phone and opened the file I'd been saving for this exact moment. It was a recording, a conversation between two board members I'd captured weeks ago, right after the fire. One of them had slipped, saying, "He'll rebuild." Sure, but not here. Not while Cranston runs things. It didn't prove arson, but it proved intent. Malicious intent. I tapped the screen and let it play out loud. The room fell silent. Eyes darted. The loyalists looked shaken. Then I stepped forward, facing the board and the rest of the room. I spoke calmly, clearly, reminding everyone that we still had power. Not in threats or fear, but in votes, in truth, and in unity. Mrs. Langford handed me the envelope, and with trembling fingers, I raised it up for all to see. "This," I said, "is how we take back control." Suddenly, the doors unlocked. With a loud click, everyone flinched. A voice rang out from the hallway. Was the county sheriff. Apparently, one of the residents had called when the panic alert went off. Officers stepped in, asked for the board's IDs, and collected the folder of evidence. Cranston stood, his jaw clenched, but he didn't resist. The sheriff turned to me and said, "You might want to come by the office tomorrow. Looks like this isn't the first complaint we've had." It felt like the war was over. We'd won. Or so I thought. Later that night, as I returned to my rental, I found a letter taped to my door. No signature, just one line written in black marker. "You may have the board, but you don't know what they were covering up." I stared at that letter for a long time, reading the words over and over. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to believe that the fight was done, that justice had been served, and that the truth had finally come out. But deep down, I knew that in places like this, power doesn't just disappear. It hides. It waits. Still, I wasn't the same person I was when all of this started. Neither were the neighbors who once lived in silence. We'd pulled the curtain back on something much deeper than HOA corruption. We'd learned how fear can be used to control people, and how quickly that control can spread if no one stands up. The sheriff's office opened a formal investigation into the HOA's finances. Cranston and his loyal board members were suspended indefinitely while the county reviewed everything. Residents voted in a new temporary board, this time made up of actual homeowners who wanted transparency, not power. Maria and James were both appointed to leadership roles, and Mrs. Langford, turns out she'd been documenting shady dealings for years, quietly waiting for someone to do something with it. She became the unexpected hero of the whole story. As for me, I bought the land where my mansion once stood. But instead of rebuilding right away, I decided to wait. Walk the neighborhood, talk to people, help clean up what Cranston left behind. There was something powerful in knowing we'd taken back control the right way by exposing lies with truth, not revenge. That alone made it worth it. Still, I kept the letter. Not out of fear, but as a reminder. Because stories like this don't always end with one villain. Sometimes there are layers. But this time, we peeled one back, and in the end, I didn't just buy the HOA. I helped rebuild the neighborhood's voice stronger, louder, and finally heard.